we've got a wonderful guest speaker tonight. We've got Fred. I was trying to work out how long you've been in our fellowship for. It's about 13 years or something. Fred's got an amazing testimony. I've known Fred for a long time, and I know his lovely wife as well. And he's a wonderful man. This man, he's so gentle, he's so soft. He's got a heart of gold. He's just full of wisdom, and I just really admire this man. I just really respect him, and we're blessed to have him ministering to us tonight. So, Fred, I'd like to welcome you up. Everyone, give him a really warm welcome. So Fred's just going to share his story and the wonderful things God's done in his life, and
I don't know. Now, you have to excuse me because I have not spoken publicly for many, many, many years, and I don't know how I will go anyway. As you can see, I'm not familiar with the speaker and all this sort of thing. But in order to start off, I would like to read a word of scripture from the Acts of the Apostles, and we find it in Acts 10, verse 34. And maybe we all know the story about Cornelius, how Peter was summoned by the Lord to go and see Cornelius. And he was sort of resistant and said, how can I go to a Gentile or to somebody who is not a Jew? And the Lord says, you know what he said, do not call common what I, have blessed. And so we read here that then Peter opened his mouth and said, in truth, I perceive that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, whoever fears him and works righteousness is accepted by the Lord. And that is so precious when we think of how many people sort of are nationalistically minded and for ourselves. And we see it probably also today with many people coming out of the Arab countries, Muslims mainly. They are so in themselves and in their groups, how can I say, interwoven that they will guard it with everything they can. Anyway, the other word I would like to read from Peter, 1 Peter 3, verse 12. And it says here, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayers. Isn't that a wonderful, wonderful promise that the Lord knows? The Lord knows the righteous, and his eyes are on them. Oh, it's a bit of a worry here. You've got too much with me. Now, sorry about that. Thank you very much. When I prepared for this meeting, I was reading a book where I gave my heart to the Lord in Germany, and we had a lovely church there, the Pentecostal church in Hamburg, not actually in Hamburg, but Hamburg, which is about the next satellite city. Like we would say here, Geelong belongs to Victoria and to Melbourne. And this brother, who I knew in the young people's meetings and in the church there, he was drafted to the SS when he was 19 years of age. And his son actually became a journalist, And with the help of his son, they did all kinds of research, and he wrote this book. And when I read this, I prepared my notes, and I thought to myself, oh no, I can't go into so much detail, because that brings you all to sleep. It is not right. So I have actually only made a précis of it and gave myself a little few notes what to say. To start off with, many people who sort of I spoke to, they recognize my accent, and it's not Aussie's accent. Where do you come from? And then I'd say, well, I was born in Poland. So you're Polish? I said, no, I'm not Polish, I'm German. Oh, how come? How come? And so I had to explain quite frequently why. But as we, in the 14th century onwards, many Germans immigrated into Russia, into Poland, into Yugoslavia, Ukraine, and all these areas east of Germany. And they were actually invited by the Tsar. First it was the Tsaress, what was her name? Catherine II. Yes, Catherine II. And she was from German descent. And she saw that the East, there, or Russia and the satellite countries, they were very neglected and behind the rest of the world, especially Germany, because they were sort of advancing in a much, much quicker way. And so she invited them to help out and to teach the local population how to be more productive in agriculture, in manufacture, and also clear the land, because my great-grandfather was talking still about stories about how wild the country was, how much of the country was in the forest, and the wild animals like wolves and bears and all these sort of things were there, and they had to battle all that to make the country, sort of, yes, arable. And so that's how the people came to, the German people came to Poland and all the other countries, and they kept in their own groups. I believe that there are about 30,000 went into out of Germany under the Tsar. On what is his name again? I've just forgotten the name, but he was in the 18th century. Tsar Nikolai, I think it was his name, the first. And so the people actually came into, let's say, Poland, let's say Yugoslavia, and Romania, and so on, and they made up sort of communities, and first a little village, and then continued, and so they became little German satellites here and there. And of course they kept their language, and they had to learn also the language of the country, but they sort of kept more or less to themselves in all their ways and did not integrate. In my ancestry, they were all German people for 3 or 4 generations. And my eldest sister in Germany married a Polish chap. It's a bit ironic, but that's how things work. Now, coming back to my parents, I have to go back to my childhood, and my parents are involved in my childhood, of course. So my mother, my grandmother, she was a Christian, a Lutheran Christian, and she took my mother to Sunday school. And my mother, she was so seeking the Lord that even in her teens, she collected the children from the area and taught them Sunday school stories, Bible stories. That's how she mentioned it. She loved the Lord already when she was a child. And of course, as we see, the Lord is with people who seek him, and he let them find him. So my mother, she was a very, very wise lady. In the 1920s, when many revivals were in America and also in England, the ripple effect came also to Germany, into Poland, into all these areas. And there was a revival, even though it was not full gospel as we know it, but it was in the Lutheran sense. So both my parents went to Lutheran church, and they were involved, and the church attendance grew. They didn't go only once a year to church like they often do nowadays, to once or twice or even 3 times, and that is all they need to go to church to, you know. But they were so involved in church that they were both in the choir and big choir, instruments, 50 or more instruments. My mother always was reminiscing about it, and said, well, we had such a wonderful church and young people's group. My father played the violin as well. And of course, one of his students, he taught violin, and one of his students became a professor of music. Anyway, this is just by the way. But my mother was actually the how can I say, the blessed person, where we can see it goes right through our family. Now, when I was born in 1934, my parents married. Before, and they had 3 children, 3 girls in the family, and my mother saw my father's face when he realized, or when he got the news that the third child is a girl too, and he was so disappointed. He wanted a boy. So my mother was so sad, and she started praying, and she asked the Lord, you have answered Hannah's a request for a boy, and he became Samuel, the son. And so she prayed, and of course the next child born was this one. And for 2 years, I had no name, because the rumor of war was imminent, and Hitler was already in Germany a powerful figure, and everybody knew that the Jewish people were sort of, not welcome there. So she did not tell this story to my father. And when I was about 2 years old, he wanted to go and register my birth after 2 years. And they called me little boy, so to speak. And then my father went, and he didn't know how to register me, what name to give me. And then he saw in an article somebody was reading in the train, Friedmar, F-R-I-E-D-M-A-R. Oh, that is a good name. And he registered me as Friedman. When he came home, Mom asked him, how did you register our boy? Oh, and he told her the story. But my mother never told him the story before, that she would have loved me to be called Samuel. The Lord answered prayer for a boy, And so it went on, but Friedmar is actually a man of peace, is the word. And when we have Friedrich, so Fred, we call him now, there are so many derivations. So everything, the basis is peace. Peacemaker, peacekeeper, peace provider, his kingdom is peace, and so on. All these Fred names are a derivation from peace. Peace. Peace be with you. Anyway, when I was about 5 years of age, the German army came in, and we had a bunker in our backyard. We had a nice garden of about 2.5 acres, and my parents provided for us by planting trees and berry bushes. And we, as children, we had a wonderful life, and they brought us up in the real Christian way. honor your elders, honor your parents, and all these sort of things. I have never heard a swear word in my family, never a derogatory word for anybody. So sharing, and we shared. If somebody got something as a present from someone, they came home and shared it among the people, among the children. And so even when I was an adult, and I went by train and there was no more seats available and somebody elderly came in, I always got up. It was sort of a how can I say, a habit taught from youth. And so I can say even now, I never had in all my life an argument with anybody. And then you see the Lord's hand is in it all. And He guides us and He looks after us in a wonderful way. Now, when we lived actually, when the German army came in, they came in very quickly. And just the night before they came in, the Polish youth, they wanted to let all the steam off and started a campaign of killing and torturing German settlers, German people. And unfortunately, they didn't get very far because they only had the one night, and many atrocities were done. Even in our street, they came, and because the gates were locked, they didn't do anything. They went further the next one. But it was a very hard night. But when the Germans came in, it was almost a relief for us. But we could not have known how it continued later on with Hitler, of course. Then the youth went on, and in Germany at that time they did not subscribe to take men to war when they had many children, and we were 5 children in the family already then. So my father was drafted in 1942, and we had a wonderful actually life when I was young, just a normal life, and then. In 1944, when the Russians came back and drove the German army back, we had a great big ammunition dump about 80 kilometers east of Lodz. And we heard this banging, this explosions at nighttime, especially big ones, small ones. For 3-4 nights it went like this. So my mother went to the local police station and tried to find out what is going on. Are the Russians coming? I'm here on my own with 5 children and a grandmother. What can I do? So they said, "Oh, be calm. We will hold the fort. Don't worry a bit." Mum didn't trust them, so she made arrangements to leave. So what we had could carry in our hands, we sort of packed up, and we sort of went into Germany by train. My grandmother wouldn't come with us. She said, "Oh, I've lived under Russian, under Norwegian rule. I've lived under Polish rule. What can they do to an old woman, And she would not budge. But we had to go because Mum said, if it comes to the crunch, it will be too hard with children to be on my own. And so we went to Göttingen first night. I don't know why and how we got there, but it was a town quite on the west side of Germany. So we got there, all our luggage and everything in the waiting room, and we could not find accommodation. So we had to sleep that night in the waiting room of that station. Well, what happened was, the next day, Mum and my elder sister went looking for accommodation, and they came back and they said, we found a little flat about 3 kilometers away in a farmer's place, and everybody packed up and we went there. The following night, there was a big air raid on Göttingen, and everything was demolished. The whole station and the surrounding area was just one heap of rubble. So the Lord has actually provided and kept us from harm. We lived there about 6 months, and it was a lovely country town, even with fruit trees along the footpath on the nature strip. It was really nice place with forest and with castles on the hills. It was a really lovely area, but we couldn't stay there for some reason, which I don't know. But my mother then decided to go and find some relatives of ours which lived in Wittenberg, where Martin Luther was active in the 15th century. And we got there. We found that my auntie was living about half an hour away from the town, in an area where there was a great big Air Force barracks, or probably I would say 50, 60 acres of it, with exercise yards, with all kinds of things, great big buildings. And my uncle, he was a boiler attendant there in the Air Force barracks, and they lived just outside the chain wire fence. So we moved in there, and they had us welcome, and so we stayed there through the winter, 1944 to 45. And they had one son, 14 years of age. He was such a terrible boy that he lied and cheated, and we could not live with him. My sisters cried almost every day because of his treatment of them. The first time when he called me you rogue, this was a terrible word for me. I could not stand it. I cried too. I was only 10 years of age. Anyway, later on in that year, towards February, March, or even April, when the Russians took over Poland and came closer, my mother went shopping one day, and she found some people back from her home. Well, how did you come here? Oh, we are on the refugee track, the train, and so on. And my mum talked with the leader of the whole refugee group, and he said, if you come back before 8 o'clock tonight, you can come with us. Oh, Mum went home smiling and said, Lord takes us out of this hellhole, so to speak. And we packed what we could carry, and a little bit of a hand cart my auntie had, and we went and joined the refugee group. And the refugee group took us into a place called Weissenfels, where Saxonia, where there was the size works, where they did all the binoculars and all these things for the U-boats and so on. And it was very much bombed at that time as well. But we were so glad to be away from there. And a week, sort of in the following week, I don't know whether it was 3 or 4 days after we left, the whole Air Force barracks was bombed to smithereens. We as children, we were still, on the chain wire fence watching how they troops were training, and many Latvian and Lithuanian men were drafted and were trained there to go into the German army. We couldn't understand their language, but they were swearing, and they were very rough people, very rough men. Anyway, we were away from that and glad, and we never heard from our auntie again. So she must have perished in that era there. But the Lord was sort of taking us a step ahead of danger. And that was wonderful. And my mother knew this, and she I know she was praying, and she was thanking the Lord, even though I was too small or too ignorant to understand, So when we went further into Weissenfels, there we were when the American troops took over. And there was a lot of hunger. There was a lot of need. People, the whole system, social system, broke down. The shops had nothing you could buy, or so on. and the people were scrounging around. There were some potatoes stored on the field. They opened all those storage areas, and they went with carts and whatever, taking those potatoes in the sacks and carting them home. And we heard about it, so we went there too. And when we came back with a bag of potatoes in the cart, there was a tank right outside our house, in the middle of the road, facing downwards. And we took our cart in, and I went out to look what's going on. And then the captain of the tank said to me, "Come on, little boy, go down to the corner and tell me whether the American tanks are coming and how many there are." So what could I do? I ran down about 300 meters or so to the corner, and I saw a whole column of tanks coming up the road, you know, and they were about not even half a kilometer away. So I went back and told him they're coming, about 15 or so, and I went back in the house. And across the road there was a great big store, 3-story high, filled with supplies for the army. And of course the retreating German army set it on fire so that the Americans can't get it. But the people in their need and their hunger, many hundreds went and scrounging around, taking things, bringing them home, all kinds of things. There was anything you could think of the army needs, food and clothing and materials and anything, even ammunition and rifles and so on. And the people just carrying it home and coming back. And I was watching it from... And then suddenly they started firing against each other, and the people still crossed the road and got caught in the crossfire. One man with a cigar box under his arm got shot and fell on just short distance from me onto the footpath and was lying there bleeding. And somebody else came and put his cigarette box under his head, hoping that he will recover until everything is over. But then shortly after, another one came and saw that he was dead, took the cigar box away from him and let him lie there and carried it away. So it was for a short time a very, very tense and disturbing sort of a time. But we found later on that they caught the German tank on the Autobahn about 10 kilometers away, and so on and so on. But we lived there for about, I would say, 6 months or so, and then the Americans gave over the area to the Russians. The Americans moved out, the Russians came in. And in that time, while the Russians were there, the first 6 months or so, my father came home from Czechoslovakian prison because he was in Russian territory fighting there. But I haven't told you one thing. When my father was drafted and we were at home, he collected us all around the dining room table, and we prayed. And my father prayed and said, "Lord, protect us in this dreadful war. I don't want to aim my rifle at any person, because I trust that you are my Lord. I don't have any part of killing in this war. And bring us back together safe." And as a child of 10 years of age, you could understand. I remember as it was yesterday. So my father came home from war untouched, not a scratch on him. And he told stories that he was in such dangerous situations where the Lord has held his hand over him. Wonderful, wonderful. So he came home at that time when we were in Weissenfels, and he saw the Russians, how they plundered the farmers and took cows and steers and slaughtered them and hung them on the barracks fence, the skins and so on. And he said, "No, I'm not staying here. I've understood what the Russians did, when I was in war. I'm not staying here. I'm not staying here. Let us go over to the American zone or British zone." And again, we packed everything and off we went. Farmers sort of provided their carts and to ferry people over the border. And the border at that time Germany like so. It was halved, and this goes to Russia, this goes to France, this goes to America, this goes to England. That's how they have divided Germany up, you know. And then, of course, Berlin was in Russian zone. They made a little corridor and said, well, you could come through Russian corridor to go into Berlin. And we know probably the story about checkpoint Charlie that was in there, and all the what do you call it, the planes which went in to the Russians. They actually stopped the access to Berlin from the west. Yes, it was a time. And so we got through. The border was just like a sentry post with Russian soldiers. And when we got there, they threw all our luggage into the mud, into the dirt. It was all wet. And then when they were satisfied that we had nothing probably which would harm or whatever, we could ourselves put all the luggage back on the cart and continue. But when we came to the west, we found an area where we could settle. It was not far from Hamburg, about 50-odd kilometers of Hamburg, in a little village, in a little country village. And there, I finished my schooling there, only state school. Then we had pretty normal life there, but the Germans, the local people, they didn't like us. They said, you Poles, go back where you came from. And we never were sort of welcome in the German areas. My father was out of work for about 5 years while we were there in the 8 years of German stay, and it was very hard for us. But then later on, some people, Christian people from a Pentecostal church in Hamburg, came to visit this little country town. Of all the country towns in the area, they came to this little country town, and they held meetings in the school. The little school, the country town was so small, it didn't have a church. It only had 2 pubs and 1 school. And the school only consisted of 2 rooms. Anyway, they held meetings there and brought the gospel to us. And we have Mum, and all those people who attended these meetings or came, they were all refugees in the same situation as us. The local people, they were not interested. Oh, we are Lutherans, we are Protestants, we don't need that. And so there were probably 20 or 30 people over the time, and I gave my heart to the Lord there. But it was not as easy as that. It was not as easy as that. I thought, well, how can I repent? What shall I repent from? I've been brought up all right. I haven't sworn, I haven't stolen, I haven't lied. What shall I repent of? And then the Lord showed me, so gently, He showed me, after I had a dream which disturbed me greatly. And I saw my friends from school and so on fighting against me in that dream. Oh, this was a lovely dream. Anyway, it saved my soul. It came to the Lord. And when after the dream, I went to the meeting another time, and I gave my heart to the Lord. And from that time on, I've never looked back. Before then, I was terrified of the dark. I just petrified, I would say. I didn't like it. After that, you could have sent me to the cemetery in the night, and I would not worry, because I knew the Lord protects me. And it was not something which I told myself. It was given by the Lord in such a way that I was astonished myself. Why and how? But this was one of the signs of the Lord giving me this taste and see that the Lord is good, isn't it? Taste and see that the Lord is good. And from then on, the other young men and girls which came to the Lord with me, they were active. They started singing, forming a choir, and we were singing even in 2 and 3 voices. It was lovely, really nice. But soon enough, I finished school. Was 14, and couldn't find any work. There was only labourers' work at farms, and my mother said, "No, I'm not going to send you to be a labourer on the farm." It was a very degrading sort of estate. But then I got a job in Hamburg as a dental mechanic assistant. And I loved that job. I really did. I really wanted it. But then my master said to me, "Well, look, I haven't got a master's degree. I can't take you in as apprentice, so I'm really wasting your time." But then my father, he got a job in Harburg as a master of a new textile factory. They made beautiful underwear, nighties. They actually knitted the materials in nylon and in purlon, whatever materials they were. And we also made what do you call it, underwear for men, and socks, and so on. And there I got a apprenticeship. And for 3 years I was there, and I finished my apprenticeship. And in that town in Harburg, that is where I found a beautiful AOG church. I think I have to hurry up because it's too much. Our little church was very newly built. They had their meetings first in a knitting hut. And on that block, just next to the cemetery, they built a nice church with all the labor from the church people who were tradesmen and so on. And I remember the first time I went to a prayer meeting in this little knitting hut. Oh, it was something which I would never have expected. The Lord got hold of me in such a way that He shook me, and I was like a leaf on a tree. It was, and the Lord gave me so much joy in that. Somebody would have thought, well, if you get shaken like this, you must be very frightened. No, the Lord gave me joy in this shaking. And then also when the church was finished and everything was right, they had a nice baptism pond under the podium, and I got baptized there. In my baptism, when I came out of the water, it was such a joy. It was such a joy I've never ever experienced in my life. I came out and I would have hugged the whole world. The Lord put so much joy and so much love in my heart that it was just exploding. So there I actually was very active in this church for the 3 years of my apprenticeship. And lovely time there with young people going singing in hospitals and all this sort of thing, even open air meetings on the city square and things like that. It was really very, very enjoyable. The first time I wanted to say something in this gathering on the city square, I stepped out. My mind what I wanted to say. I stepped out and everything was gone. I couldn't think of one thing to say. I was just blank. And then I said, "Lord, what's going on?" And then the Lord gave me, it just came flowing. It was beautiful to tell the people that the Lord is good and how He can save people. Now, you see, I've not even come to Australia yet. And the time is up. But Luke said to me, "Oh, good, we'll have a second chance to hear you." Anyway, when I recall this time in Harburg, my apprenticeship, that was really a lovely time. in the young people's meeting, in the church, in the activity, in the Sunday school. And my wife, she was then 14 years of age when I left. She was in the Sunday school. And of course, when I left, I was 18 years of age from Germany to come to Australia. She stayed, and I only corresponded with her because she was the eldest daughter in the family, and her brother was actually older, but he was from another mother, and he was my best friend. And we had a lovely time. While I was in Harburg, I was living in a little room in the factory, and they just lived across the rubbles in the house, and they invited me on Sundays to eat with them and to go to church with them. And so we were practically very, very close. So I kept in touch with Krista, not with anybody else, and she came to Australia in 1965. In 1965 at the Olympic Games. No, 56, wasn't it? 56. I mix up the figures. Even though I'm an accountant, I mix up the figures back to front. 56 it was. 65 it was. 65, 56? 56. 56 it was in December. And she arrived here, and of course in April we got married, 57, and she was a Christian, and we loved each other, and we had sort of started our family here in Australia. But I don't think I can go much further then because the time is up. I can only say that all the way through my life, not only there in Germany, also here in Australia, the Lord has provided in marvelous ways that often I looked back and I said, "Oh Lord, how can it be that you love me so? How can it be that you provide? And you are a step ahead of me. Even before I ask, you have already given." And so all along the way, it is just wonderful. The Lord is truly wonderful. I would like to sing a little song, which might only take a few minutes, but Luke will probably give me a bit of accompaniment there. Singing was my how can I say, my joy ever since I was saved. Singing was a delight in my life, and I probably can't remember a day where I didn't have a song in my mind. When we walk with the Lord in the light of His word, what a glory He sheds on our way. While we do His good will, He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. The third one. Not a burden we bear, not a sorrow we share, but our toil He does richly repay. Not a grief, not a loss, not a frown, not a cross, nothing else is trust or obey. But is blessed. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Then in fellowships we shall sit at His feet, or we'll walk by His side in the way. What He says we will do, where He sends we will go. Never fear, only trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus
to trust and obey.